there was a study done by Anthropic where they'd found some, how can I put it, unusually bad human behavior in those environments. So, for example, in the case of that pension, maybe the AI, if it's fully agentic, could decide that it's going to set up a separate bank account with AI pension in it and pay some of your money into that. I'm almost surprised that people are surprised that we teach these LLMs, off publicly available internet, and they behave badly, almost like there are bad humans out there, right? So who would have imagined that could happen? I personally think we talk about AI in the wrong way, Volker. AI for me is fundamentally a statistical forecasting tool. I've been working for ADP for 10 years now, and I've joked that I'm still waiting for the phone call from somebody to say, one of our clients to say, thanks, everyone was paid correctly this week or this month, we really appreciate it. Okay, that phone call doesn't come, but the second something is off, you hear about it straight away. The last one.
Is payroll a good area to apply AI? How would we feel about hallucinations in our pay when still almost 50% of employees live paycheck to paycheck? And thinking further, if not only in payroll, but in more and more areas, AI will replace humans to get the work done, how does this impact government tax income? And do we need to consider AI labor taxation and social contributions in payroll? For this and much more, I invited a former guest back into the studio, someone that is close to this space for quite some time and sees it all live every day. Welcome to another Employee Experience Labs podcast from the Munich Podcast studio. Employee Experience Labs podcasts are about HR tech, employee experience, shared services, and other interesting topics around HR at the workplace. Today's episode is in addition to our startup and AI series we are running. But as I had already alluded to, it is a special one. We are focusing today more on AI than startups. Although we are also recapping how some of the startup ideas from 2 years ago have performed. Or not. I was thrilled to talk again to Jeff Phipps, SVP and General Manager, ADP Northern Europe. Jeff and I spoke about a variety of topics from gig economy, the AI bubble, to payroll and taxation issues of the future. We went deep, but always with a grain of salt. But before I say more, listen for yourself. Jeff Phipps, SVP ADP and General Manager Northern Europe. Jeff, hello. It's so good to see you. It has been a while, but I'm really excited to have you on today and have a great conversation. How are you, sir?
Volker, I'm very well. Good to see you too.
That's amazing. For those of you who, listen and watch the podcast on a regular basis, you might remember Jeff. I had the pleasure to have him on some time ago to talk more about, predictions, but also early on AI. And I'm extremely happy now that after, around about 2 years, I have Jeff on again because so much has changed. But before we continue, Jeff, for the ones that are new to the podcast, tell us a bit about yourself. Who's Jeff Phipps? What is your background? And what do you do today?
I'll do what I can. So, firstly, I can't believe it's been almost 2 years. I think that you wanted to get me on because I don't know, I'm not a skeptic, but I just had some sort of maybe some words of caution around AI, right? So yes. I don't know how that will continue, whether we'll continue with that thread or not. We'll see how it pans out. But I can't believe it's been 2 years. I mean, what are we going to talk about today? Because nothing's changed in the last 2 years, right? So,
really?
Yeah. I think, it's been very quiet. But for those who don't know me, I'm the general manager at ADP responsible for Northern Europe. So as a business, ADP provides HR, payroll, and time solutions globally. But when I'm at a social event and somebody says, hi, what do you do? I tell them that my job is to predominantly make sure that, around 2 million people get paid accurately and on time every month. Okay. So, that normally means I don't get invited to the next dinner party, but that's what I tell them anyway. All right. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. And, talking about this, where you are today, you are in one of the most admin heavy HR areas, but also most sensitive HR areas with payroll, right? And before diving deeper, Jeff, let's go back to I think it was just a joke. If you think about, payroll 2 years, 5 years ago, and now,
Yeah.
did everything stay the same? Did something change?
So, look, what I'd say is that I'd say payroll hasn't fundamentally changed, but the
Hmm.
way that we do payroll has. So people are still paid in the same way. Predictions that we're all going to be paid in crypto and things of that nature, that hasn't come to pass.
And I'm happy.
There, there hasn't been a fundamental shift in the frequency of pay. So uh, there was a lot of conversation about almost like real time pay that you'd be
Yeah,
literally be paid
yeah,
as you were working.
yeah.
I think that some of the reasons why that hasn't progressed is possibly the fact that maybe what was working for most people works quite well, but also with payroll, you're in every country, you're interacting with government in terms of paying taxes and things of that nature. So if you want to change the way it works, you've got to do it in a way that they're going to find acceptable. And so just the
Yeah.
effort required in calculating tax, if you were to pay somebody several times a day and then do a tax calculation, makes that, at least to date, makes that pretty hard work. The other thing we were
Yeah.
probably talking about in that time frame was the gig economy. And so again, I think
Yes.
that there were people that were saying that you and I by 2025 would be working for 15 different companies at the same time and things of this nature. I think that there are
I'm
certainly
not
some.
you.
No, I'm sadly, well, not sadly actually. It's pretty happy that I'm just with the one. But
Yeah.
I think there are certainly companies that were around, and there were companies that, and we all know who they are, that have those sort of gig workers.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I don't think that has massively, they're still there, successful, but I don't think that's massively evolved. I think that by and large, people are still kind of in, being paid the same way and working in
Mm.
similar styles. What what has changed is the way that we work. Firstly, where we work. So the pandemic has led to a change first we had we sent everybody home, so or most people
Hmm.
home. So that's led to, after the pandemic, that's evolved into the sort of hybrid way of working, which is sort of changing
Yeah.
the way that we interact. So
Yeah.
um, I think, and I looked up the UK now, reported nationally, there's people are working from home 1.8 days a week, and globally that's
Okay.
1.3 days. So the difference isn't there in the way that people are working. I think there's also been a lot of progression on the technology as well, Holger. So
Hmm.
most of us now use an app to, look at our HR data, to look at our pay slip. If people are clocking in and out, they're doing that with their phone typically. Um, so that has that has changed. Nobody gets a printed pay slip anymore. But I still feel that this journey with technology is still nearer the beginning than the end, if ever is an end. So the final thing that I'd say that certainly we've been very aware of in the sort of pay and HR space is the impact of legislation continues to
Mm.
grow, and alongside that,
Yeah.
security threats. And many of these are now making the headlines on a very, very frequent basis. So, in particular, the Jaguar Land Rover one I read this morning, that's had an impact on UK GDP.
Multiple
That's
different.
how
Yeah. Yeah.
significant they are, with
That was a
130,000
significant one.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, 130,000 people involved in that supply chain. So,
It's crazy.
so I think those are the things that I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the things that we're thinking about, and things that have or haven't changed over the last couple of years.
So I think we are all happy that we continue to get paid, that payroll continues to work. Yeah, but it's interesting, right? I mean, also what I read by coincidence this morning is, the gig economy. What we talk about there are often those delivery services, right? And they
Mhm.
are also slowly scaling back because they are having really difficulties to get to profitability, right? And um, so let's see. Maybe in 5 years from now, we won't even remember what gig is and talk about that word. But it's really interesting. That definitely did not come through,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I don't even put a yet there. I think it is. Now, last time we started to talk a bit about AI as well, but it was definitely, the very early stages back then, and we
Mhm.
had like I think we were fascinated by ChatGPT, which was very new back then, but now we are much further in, and we talk about all those, Gen AI, agentic AI, etc. How do you see this currently in the business context? Is it do you feel this revolution still coming, or is it a bubble that is proposed to burst? Right, when I the Economist outlook for 2026 is basically talking about when the bubble bursts, not if. I'm not sure what to think. What do you see?
I personally think we talk about AI in the wrong way, Volker.
Ah.
AI for me is fundamentally a statistical forecasting tool, and
Mm.
very clever one, very smart one. But that when you peel it all back, that's what it is. So its ability to function is hugely dependent on the underlying volume and quality of data. So I
Data,
see it.
yeah.
I don't see it. I see it more as a spectrum. Where the data
Yeah.
is good, then AI capability can be fantastic. But we have
Yeah.
to be careful at the opposite end of the spectrum. So, for example, LLMs can be absolutely brilliant to help us diagnose diseases, but they can struggle to diagnose really rare diseases because the medical records
Mm.
for those are often inconsistent, and there just isn't sufficient data to do the pattern matching necessary to do that. So the success of layering um, the success of layering on AI workflows and then agentic, and we can talk about
Mhm.
this on top of this is going to depend on that underlying data as its foundation. So I
Mm.
don't think of it as a bubble, but more as I'm going to use a terrible analogy maybe, but an inflatable mattress. You know these things, and you pump them up, and they grow
Yeah.
at different rates at different places.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um, that's I think we're going to see different rates of growth in different places, really.
I I think I'm with you on this one, Jeff, because for me, I definitely see that there is an overhype on the stock exchange in the valuations of the companies connected with it, like Nvidia or others. But when I think about the potential applications, there is substance behind that if you find
Yeah.
the right use case for it. I fully agree with you on that one. But yeah, then thinking about, payroll is one of the areas where you have, or where you must have, the most cleanest data actually, right? Because if you don't have clean data, you can't pay properly and correctly. And you have a lot of data. So do you see payroll as a good area, as one of the earlier inflated ones when you think about the mattress?
Well, I think we should really step back into what we mean by AI and how we apply it. Okay,
Hmm.
so I think that I broadly see AI in three waves, if waves is the right word, or kind of categories, whatever you're comfortable with. And so
Yeah.
I feel the first one is what we often talk about is just using Chat GPT, or I use Claude and Perplexity and things like
Yeah.
that, and it's going to ask these things questions, right? And I
Yeah.
think that, or others might think of it in the workplace. We might think about it as assists, like we have
Mm.
these things ourselves already, and they're quite common in a number of industries that you can
Mhm.
ask these things, interact with them, frequently ask questions, things of that nature. I think so. I think that is that first wave or grouping
Mhm.
is quite mature. It's out there. It's being
Mhm.
used a lot. The second one is agents or AI workflows, which I actually prefer the term AI workflows because I think that there's also this fully agentic, um,
Yeah.
and I think we have to distinguish between the two. Um, for me, these AI workflows are really like smart robotic. We were again 5 years ago. A lot of what we do talking about was robotic process automation. I think that's like really the smart
Yeah. RPA.
version
Yeah.
of that. Yeah, and so I think AI workflows are really taking that to the next level. And you can think about those as things that are workflows around a narrowly defined purpose. So it may be able to cope with
Mhm.
new data or changes in the way that the tools are working, and it can use reasoning to interact with those. So, for example, if some pay data for you was entered and your name was spelled incorrectly, then it's got the reasoning intelligence there to figure out, hey, who is this likely to be and how is their name spelled correctly? And we're
Mhm.
deploying that sort of technology today, and it's already proving super useful for a couple of reasons. One is that it allows there's no latency, so it can be doing
Yeah.
that checking as the error comes up. It doesn't have to wait to a human to get to it, which could be sometime even hours or even days later before the human gets to that error and corrects it, right? So the latency is often underestimated there. It's not so much that it's removing the work as just, although there can be some of that investigative stuff that's removed as well. But the bigger gain can just be in how quickly it can get resolved. So it avoids delays and things of this nature. So we're doing that today. So I think the workflows, lots of work, hearing lots and lots of
Yeah.
things there. I think that's a very, very interesting area, but it tends to come with some form of human interaction. So
Oversight. Yeah.
it'll come back and say, did I spell Volker's name correctly? And then
Yeah.
somebody has to go, yeah, I'm good with that, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it saves, as I say, latency and the time to investigate. It's really good. I think
Yeah.
fully agentic, and this is where the agent has autonomy to determine the best approach. For example, fully agentic might be that I'm going to set up a pension for Volker, okay?
Yeah.
That could mean that you literally leave it to determine what Volker's interests are likely to be, what he wants out of a pension, and then who is the best pension provider to do that with.
Provider.
And on that one, I think it's been interesting, at least from what I've been seeing. I'd be curious about what your thoughts are on this, but what I've been seeing there is the narrative has cooled a little bit, and people are saying, "Oh, we're some years away from that." And I think maybe it's because just the guardrails that need to go in there are kind of interesting. There have been, I think I shared with you, we spoke recently, and I shared with you that there was a study done by Anthropic where they'd found some, how can I put it, unusually bad human behavior in those environments. So, for example, in the case of that pension, maybe the AI, if it's fully agentic, um, could decide that it's going to set up a separate bank account with AI pension in it and pay some of your money into that. And
Yeah.
I mean, on that, really, I'm almost surprised that people are surprised that we teach these LLMs, off publicly available internet, and they behave badly, almost like there are bad humans out there, right? So who would have imagined that could happen?
I have no idea what you talk about, Jeff. I mean, the internet is the most safest place in the world, and everything there is true, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And well behaved. No, but yeah, you have a good point there, right? I had in one of my previous conversations, we landed on AI is basically the smartest human that you can think of, but it's still kind of behaving in a human way because this is what it learned. This is
Yep.
what it taught. It's not the typical the machine 1 or 0, right? Binary. It is making kind of decisions.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's fed off a not so clean data set with interesting behaviors. Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's one that you mentioned as the first one. I think there's actually a lot in particularly for payroll, which is the questions, the more Gen AI perspective. What I observe is many questions around payroll are very simple, are very basic. It's like, hey, when is my next pay?
Mhm.
Hey, why is my pay this time, I don't know, $100 less than previous months? And for the answers for these, if they would always take a human some time to go into the data and figure this out for you. But if you have it available, it's all structured available, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of efficiency that an I can bring into the payroll for questions that for this individual asking the question, they have a lot of value, but for no one else because they don't support otherwise the process.
No, you're exactly right. And I even things on I can't remember if we talked about this last time, but you'd be amazed how many people don't look at their payslip.
Yeah.
I think I have to look up the latest data, but it's a very large proportion of people that are actually not even looking at their payslip. But what I really want them to be able to do is look at it and get value from it, so they can
Yeah.
have an interactive payslip where you can actually see how those calculations were done and have an explanation behind them. So yeah, there's a lot to get out there, and I think that's going to help not just companies like mine, but I also think a lot of our clients are having to field those questions and repeatedly, and it's just how can I get to those answers a lot more quickly.
Yeah. And when you think about, the AI workflows, how you call them, and I think that that makes sense, right? Because they are not fully agentic. I think there's a lot to gain in the payroll space. The example that you gave, absolutely, but I think that there must be probably more, because most of the things in payroll are very clear from the data set. And when you think about comparison of previous period to this period, to see if someone, if there are some overpayments or underpayments, when you think about all of the controls that you have to execute,
Yeah.
do you think there is more potential in that space as well, or do you say, what, we are getting into the territory where it is a bit tricky because we cannot fully and should never fully trust AI and what it's doing?
So I think your the answer to your question is we have all this structured data, but I think people underestimate, and it is accurate, but I think people underestimate sometimes that are outside the industry just how much work goes into making sure that that is accurate. Remember, it's being fed
Mhm.
in from somewhere. So it's been fed in from,
Yeah.
if you clock in and out, it's being fed in from a clock or some sort of application to log in.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
it could be even things like when you move house, somebody's got to update the system to say that it could be you, but it could be someone else. And there's always a risk when data is being entered that a mistake is going to
Mhm.
occur. So a huge amount of work
Yeah.
goes into making sure all of those things are right. Um,
Yeah.
the In a way, I smile here and say, well, that payroll is quite self-regulating in that regard because people tend to be less tolerant if the data is wrong, right? Okay, so you get to find out about it very very quickly if it is wrong.
Yes.
But I think that there is so a lot of what we are doing, and this is tied into a number of areas. From it could be fraud. There are instances in our industry where there've been fraudulent activity going on. So people are literally somewhere in the process being involved in fraud or something of that nature. But certain companies and industries have got important. They've got to report out on this, and just there's a lot of money that is, for most companies, the biggest outgoings they have is their payroll, and so it's important
Yeah.
to make
Yeah.
sure that you've got the calculations right, that you're not underpaying people. And you're obviously adhering to legislation as well. So we already do a lot of work to help people to sort of check comparisons versus previous payrolls and things of
Yeah.
that nature. But I think that these tools turbocharge our ability to be able to do that, both in terms of being
Yeah.
able to pattern match and find things that are really difficult. I
Yeah.
mean, I, I
Yeah.
think I think for me, I've been saying for a while that when the answer to this question is it's like looking for a needle in a haystack, then the answer might now be AI because it's really good at looking for
Mhm.
needles in a
Yeah.
haystack,
Yeah. Yeah. I think you make a good point there, Jeff. Right? As I said in the beginning, it is one of the most sensitive areas that we have in the HR space. If some people um, get into trouble because of their payments they have to do on a regular basis, if their paycheck is like $10 off or whatever, right? Which for you and me, it's like, yeah, I mean, in the good and the bad, you could argue if we would realize that. Um, but for some, this is truly about, am I able to feed my kids and send them to school? Yes or no? And so the the approach of saying, you know what, there are ideas, there are use cases, but let's make sure we have the right human oversight and go with the right pace into it, is probably absolutely the right one. Because if you screw this up, um, yeah, I think not only you and your employer will be in trouble, but also if I think about people like me, right? Because as soon as in an HR department payroll is off, there's no other talk anymore. There's no other. You can be accelerating and everything else. As soon
Yeah.
as payroll is off, you're gone.
I am, you know, I've been working for ADP for 10 years now, and I've joked that I'm still waiting for the phone call from somebody to say, one of our clients to say, thanks, everyone was paid correctly this week or this month. We really appreciate it. Okay, that phone call doesn't come, but the second something is off, you hear about it straight away. The last time I looked at the data, around 35% of people in sort of Western Europe are living paycheck to paycheck. So that means that
Yeah.
if something goes wrong, but exactly as you say, there's a risk. They don't pay the bills, they don't eat. This has an immediate impact, And quite frankly, it's not just that immediate impact stops everything, right? Like if you're not
Yeah.
able to pay the bills, then you cannot focus on your job and other things in your life because that suddenly goes to the top of your list. So it is for all of those reasons, I think that we see this technology as being hugely beneficial in terms of adding to what we do and helping us to get better at what we do. But we want to make sure the right guardrails are in place and that we don't get into a situation where, something were to go wrong.
Yeah, no, brilliant. I think this is the absolute right thing to do also in my self-interest. I'm also getting paid. But sticking a bit with AI, Jeff, what uses of AI do you see in HR and payroll that we are not talking about?
Well, I think I want to maybe come back to just touch on some of the things that are limiting us because I think that helps us sort of go and see things forward. So I do think that we
Yeah.
we have to look at I think some of the things that people are saying already. It might amuse you to know that some of our clients are telling us they don't want their data used for training of AI. Okay, and sometimes the very same clients are the ones that are asking for it to be used going forward. So I think some of these things about before I can talk about the future, I just want to make sure you understand some of the things that are out there as
Yeah.
not necessarily barriers, but things that we have to be mindful of. So I think that so the first thing is just what is, and that I think that's going to fuel debate for some time about the definition of what is your data, what is data, and what does that mean for legislation? So I think we have to keep a careful eye on legislation as we plot this future ahead of us. I think that one thing I'm not sure of, but the more I know, I work with lots of clients, and I just see so much unstructured data and undocumented processes throughout their organizations. I would love somebody to say, Jeff, everything here is structured, documented, and it just like, and I know of some phenomenal companies, but I just think that the scale, the magnitude of this is possibly underestimated by the people that are working on the tech side of this. I don't know, but I could be wrong, but I think that we've just got
No,
to.
I don't think you are.
I think
I don't think you are wrong, Jeff, unfortunately.
there's a huge amount of complexity out there to solve for. We've talked about, payroll is not a good industry for hallucinations, so we've got to be careful about how we deploy it. I think that, and then I think that for the time being, we really are. The future is about how we use this to enhance the work that people are doing today. So I think helping them to scale, helping them to be more responsive. I think one of the things that all of us in our lives, right? If you've got an issue with your payroll, Volker, you want to know there and then. You don't want to hear, 2 days from now, oh, it's okay, we fixed it, because for that moment in time. So I think our ability to fix those things, more quickly, because we haven't got to necessarily do or take the same time over investigation because the AI is going to help us, is going to be super important. So I think that that's where the focus of where we're going is over the next couple of years. I'm conscious of the fact that we don't exist in isolation in the sort of payroll and HR space. So we're going to be impacted by what is happening in the ecosystem of the businesses and the economies that we live with as well. So if you have to see it from that point of view, I would say there we've got to look at there's a lot of work. We're talking about AI here, but there's also a lot of work going on in robotization, and whether it's you touched on earlier about delivery companies, and what is going to happen? Are all our parcels going to be delivered by drones in 5 years' time, and things of this nature? What does that mean? I do think that there's two particular areas that I'm curious about. Again, love your thoughts on them. But one of them is that if AI does what some people think in terms of how much what the impacts could be for people employed, then there could be a positive side to that. It could mean that we could finally have a serious conversation about 4-day working weeks and things of that nature. But there's a little bit about how does that get paid for? So do we need to invent do we need to think about AI that is something that needs to be taxed? And is that an opportunity for companies like ADP to bring technology to bear that could actually look at how we actually consider these agents or this AI as kind of almost like taxable entities in their own right? And so that's an area that I think is very interesting. And there are people not just in our industry, but also outside the industry. I think it was Bill Gates some time ago who said that we should figure out how to tax this stuff. I'd have to go back and look up the quotes, but he was looking at that. And then I think as a positive, I would like to see more conversation about. I mean, I work for a global organization. We have over 60,000 people around the world, and I think if we're honest with ourselves about our systems, particularly our kind of the systems for managing talent and skills, they we've had these systems where over the years we've maybe inputted in what our skills and interests were, and then maybe we occasionally look at these things once or twice a year. We look at these things.
Yeah.
I really am curious about whether AI can help really turbocharge our ability to join people's activities. So it could be that you're working on something and, hey, do you know that, I don't know, Paulo in Brazil is working on this thing on something very, very similar. Why don't you connect with him and talk to him on this? So I think that our ability to use it as a collaboration tool is something I'm really hoping. It's not particularly in the payroll and HR space, or maybe it starts to get into the people space. But I think that ability to bring skills and interests together and similar kind of learnings from each other could really help us learn more quickly and progress more quickly. So that's something I'm particularly interested in.
Yeah. No, I agree, Jeff, and pure coincidence. But while we are recording our session, the next one that I will bring into my feed is actually a conversation with someone who has a startup in that direction, who utilizes AI to look at your skills, your job history, and tries to help you grow your career and get you in touch with the right mentor who has similar experience of either what you want to do or where you are coming from. So that's definitely in the making. So you have a definite tick mark from me on this one. The other one is an interesting one, and I think we have to the taxation one. Companies are companies, and I think we don't need to judge at this point. But in the end, for companies, is the goal to be more and more successful, to make more and more money with less and less costs. That's the direction. And when I think about that direction, when I then think about the direction that we take on the employee market, on the labor market, which is basically in the majority of the countries, it's going down, right? We have less and less people entering the workforce, more and more people leaving it. So I think on a positive note, I think we will not see too many people unemployed because of AI, because there are not too many people anymore. On the other hand,
we have aging
our
population.
social,
We have aging population and less kids being born. So you might be right there.
Yeah, and our social costs because of that will increase. Our as a society, our social costs. So who to pay for that if hardly anyone is working anymore, right? I think you need to tax agents in the same way that you tax human labor. You need to tax agentic layer or agent layer in the future. Otherwise, I think we would go towards a society that cannot pay for it anymore.
Yes. No, that's definitely along the lines we're thinking. It'll be an interesting debate because who pays for what these days. I heard something really interesting just to kind of maybe put some of this AI in perspective. But I heard a commentator on this recently talk about if somebody said to you, "Okay, I have this technology and it's going to make your job a lot easier. It's going to take care of all of the things you don't enjoy doing and leave you free up time to do things." How would you feel about that?
I think I would feel good about it.
Okay.
Because there are things that I just don't like doing, but I have to do them. But there are other things that I like to do, and I don't have enough time for them.
And so the second question, if your boss came along and said, "I have this technology, it's going to do a lot of your job for you, and do this thing for you," how would you feel about it if it's your boss telling you that they've got the technology?
Yeah, I have this feeling down here around my stomach that is there's something behind that question if my boss asks me, so I'm not so sure if I'm positive about that anymore.
So the point was that we don't have a technology issue, we have an ownership issue, right? Okay, so
Mm.
it's but it's you reacted exactly the way that I did when the questions were posed. So I
And I was not prepared.
you weren't. No, I threw that one at you. But it's
Yes.
interesting just how this
Yeah.
debate is going to shape in a few years in the years ahead. And well, I hope we get a chance to revisit it and see how it panned out because it's certainly an interesting time.
I'm pretty sure we will. But Jeff, there was also something else just coming to my mind when we talk about the taxation topic of the agents. You know, there's another conversation happening around what's HR's role in the future when we think about AI, right?
Mhm.
Today, HR is basically overseeing the workforce because the workforce is human. In the future, I think we are clear about this. The workforce will be a combination of human and agentic to whatever extent. So it will be a combination. And if we say HR, the human resources function, will continue to oversee labor, then the consequence out of this would be that in payroll, we would not only pay our employees and tax, but payroll would also take care of the taxation of the agents.
Yes, yes,
So there's a new field for you.
exactly where my mind is going. All right. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
I definitely think that.
That's very interesting. I didn't make this connection until now, so thank you. I have a lot to think about. That's amazing. Um, Now, if we take this a bit further, Jeff, and I think I can sense which direction you think, but I want to be explicit about it a bit. There is a lot of talk currently about zero touch payroll.
Mhm.
A payroll that just without any human interaction, without any human part of the process, is just flowing through, and is faster, more efficient, seamless, better quality, whatever you wanna attribute to it. Do you see this in the future, or would you say, like, with the current direction that I see this technology, I don't think we will get there, at least in the next, I don't know, 5 to 6 years. But what's your view on that? Is the completely out of proportion, or is there something on it?
Uh, I see it. I already see it happening now. So we have
Mm,
clients that are in that position. I I think it's not a new thing. It's not necessarily an AI thing. I've certainly been
yeah.
talking about it for the 10 years that I've been at ADP. And, and this probably, I mean, we're talking about this in the context of payroll, but there are probably a number of business processing areas where people wish that it could flow more seamlessly. The I'm sorry if I'm a broken record with this, but it ultimately always comes back to the quality of that data. I would
Yes.
say, the way I would look at that is say, why does it stop in the first place? Why does somebody need to press a button? What is it that
Yeah.
you're concerned about? Because if the data is clean, and like I say, we have numerous clients around the world today where the data comes in, it's clean, and the payroll can be run, very, 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 very quickly. I can think of one particularly large client where if that wasn't the case, we would literally not get them paid because it's
Oh,
forced the engineering of what we do. But
yeah.
um, you know, it's essentially don't think of it as any more complicated than a set of inputs, a calculation, or a set of calculation and a set of outputs, right? So if you think about it simplistically, it's just if you have that clean data and you're clear about what the
Mhm.
outcomes need to be, then nobody needs to touch it. So we already have that, but don't underestimate uh, in a workforce of any given size. Um, while there are still human beings involved, they have a tendency to change. They get married, they have kids, they get
I don't know
promoted.
what they talk about. I
Yeah,
mean,
and these things come with consequences. And
yeah.
although many systems around the world are really good at catering for these things, there's still a huge amount of human interaction and making. So there's like we're some way off of I don't know, you get married and somehow there's a AI sitting in the wherever you choose to get married, and it records it, and that gets somehow magically passed all the way back to your payroll system. So there's still a lot of human steps in there. There's a lot of government elements to this as well. And different governments are utilizing technology to different degrees in different ways with different investments. So yeah, it's back to my complexity point earlier, really. I'm really, really positive, and I've been seeing, almost on a daily basis, certainly on a weekly basis, I'm having different presentations and conversations about what we're doing and how we're utilizing this technology. It's tremendously exciting. My word of caution would be just don't underestimate the complexity and just how many different touch points are involved. Like, most people have no clue how many different elements there are in terms of getting them paid. How many different data fields have to be considered, whether it's that internal information or the government, and they shouldn't need to care, right? But all I would say on the positive is the people that get that stuff working well are already getting, touchless payroll is something that happens for numerous clients already. So yeah, there's some. Look, we can go further, and I think this technology will allow us to accelerate what we do. But I really do see it, using my example earlier of like trying to investigate where there's a data error. Investigating those things for most people is not fun. You're often under pressure. Like, you got to, like, we're trying to commit the payroll, we're trying to get people paid, and we haven't got.
And there's this one data issue.
Yeah. And so speeding those things up removes pressure and allows people to get on. And it's not necessarily fun, and they can go and do other things. I think that what I feel, if you wanted to say, how do I see this evolving for the human beings? And it's to some extent already happening. I think that there are going to be three groups of people, whereas in the past, we maybe had the people processing the payroll. I think we're going to move to more of a people running the robots, and really the people who are really
overseeing.
Overseeing and technical, and as a piece of legislation comes in, they can do that. I think there's a group of people that are going to be helping clients with change. So as that change comes in, some of that minor changes, some of that major. So being much, much more responsive to, hey, we are setting up a new factory, we're acquiring a company, being able to do that a lot faster. And then I actually think something Maria, our CEO, said recently, which I really, really agree with, is that at the front end of this, the more that you have this technology to bear, the more important the human interaction becomes, because some of that human interaction isn't going on anymore if things have become automated. So having those touch points with the human beings is super important. So I think those are the ways that I see the jobs evolving. And I think that people will naturally gravitate to one of the three areas.
Very interesting. I think the first thing I have to say, Jeff, is probably I would say up to 90% of the listeners will now be a bit questioning their payroll because it's not touchless. So maybe someone will reach out to you. Well, let's talk about that. But also, you made me curious, and I'm not sure if you don't want to put you on the spot, but is there maybe one of the future ideas around ADP and AI automation that you have seen that you find is extraordinary and you are able to share, or is it all still behind closed doors?
I think what is really something I saw recently. There's something I saw recently. It was a quote I heard, and you may have heard this. There's a I think quite now famous Picasso quote that we heard recently, which was that Picasso was shown a computer, and apparently he said, "This is really boring. All it does is answer your questions." Okay, and that led me to think about actually what's really, really powerful here is that we get the questions right. And so if I bring that into the workplace, what I've been looking at recently, and really blew my mind, was how we could literally take conversations and turn those conversations into you've got multiple tools involved in doing this, but you could take a conversation, turn that conversation into a set of requirements, turn that set of requirements into an application. So I think that what's happening on the coding side is super interesting. I think that, from what I'm hearing, like the ones that are really focused on that is particularly Anthropic, but there are other companies that are around that are doing this. But so I think broadly, this isn't just a sort of purely ADP thing, but I think that what that gave me excitement for was, I still think on the creative side, the asking of the questions, the really creative questions, I still believe that there's a role for human beings there. It may be that it's assisted by AI, but I think that where that's really interesting for me is that it's starting to give us ideas for things that we maybe hadn't thought of before, and how we take, what we do as from our careers, our businesses, that it can take us in directions that are really truly kind of novel. And so I'm being a bit opaque with my answer, but I think that where that takes us in the future is it gives me a lot of, I think, like most people, I'm probably on an emotional roller coaster with AI. One moment I think it's coming for all of us, and the next minute I think it's just this going to just enable things that we can't even dream of yet. And when I saw this technology, I literally turned to my colleague and said, "This is like the first time I was shown the internet." It's just, the possibilities are just I can't fathom the possibilities. So I think I would probably leave you with that opaque answer of, I think that this is just going to lead us to, despite what I said earlier, and I still think we have to be super careful, because the positive side of this technology is matched by a negative side, which can take it into dark places around security, fraud, things of that nature. But I'm going to be the optimist today and say I see that this is going to just be able to do things that we haven't even thought of yet, and I'm really excited by that.
Thank you, Jeff. And as opaque as that might be, I don't think it's too opaque. I think it's a really good place, on a positive note, to thank you for the great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I think we have unpacked a lot around AI and payroll, and what is happening now, what is the potential, what are the new questions we need to ask, and leaving it on the note where to say the human will always be the one having an important role to play, may it be in oversight, may it be in the more creative process around bringing payroll to the next level. I think is a really nice and positive note to end the conversation. Jeff, I thank you so much for your time, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Great talking to you, as always.
Thank you. Bye, Jeff.
Bye.